So, the PowerPoint here, I've done this workshop for a few of you, or some of you have attended it. How many have done my meeting management or Parley Pro workshop? A few of you, okay. So, just very quickly about my background. Probably most of you know that I was the county party chair and I'm the current, one of the current Democratic National Committee members. But long ago and far away, I was a high school teacher. I taught agriculture and horticulture, and in that I was the advisor for the Future Farmers of America chapter, and oddly enough, FFA chapters all over the United States have parliamentary procedures teams, and they compete against one another. And that's how we teach our kids, our students, parliamentary procedures or Robert's Rules of Order. So I did it as a high school student, I competed, and then as a teacher, obviously, I advised and coached my teams who competed. So that's the foundation for my expertise in this area. I've used these skills a variety of times in a variety of ways. I was a union president. It was very effective there. Certainly my work in the party, it's been very beneficial. So I'm going to try to get through this. This is normally about an hour-long workshop, and actually Betty gave me some extra time, so thank you. But I'm going to condense it down and move through quickly. If you have questions that are just to clarify something that's up there or that I've just said, feel free to ask that. If it's a question that is a hypothetical, sort of a problem-solving thing, let's see if we have time at the end to address those. Because oftentimes what happens is people ask questions that the next slide will answer. So save that sort of question till the end, but we'll get through this.
I have one quick question. Can we get a copy of this?
Yeah,
They're printing out now.
you're getting handouts.
Okay.
They're
They're printing
them.
them out
Yeah.
now.
What is it same as your presentation?
Pardon?
The handouts are same as your presentation?
They will cover everything in the
Okay.
presentation. This is sort of, I'm not one of those people that just stands here and reads
Yeah.
what I put up on the
Good.
PowerPoint.
Yes.
It's really an outline visual for you so that and it helps me go through the narration.
Yeah.
So actually I'm asking the first question though, why do we use parliamentary procedure? What's the benefit of using parliamentary procedures? This is
Order.
Consistency.
interactive.
Cons-
To be fair,
to have
consistent,
a problem solving so that if there's a problem, you've got a procedure.
problem solving, or a process that is standardized and everybody understands it.
Framework.
Right. And bottom line, again, it's fair. Next one. When do you not use parliamentary procedure or Robert's Rules of Order? When is it a good time to just sort of say, we're going to chill out and step away from that?
Something like now?
Something like now, perhaps. Or let's say you're doing a board retreat and you want to actually, or even a club meeting where you want to, really just have some dialogue and conversation. And you can always go, especially with your board meetings when there's a small body, there are some alternatives. What would be an alternative sort of decision-making process with a very small body rather than motion, second, discussion, vote? Consensus. So just developing an idea, everybody putting their 2 cents into that and sort of compromising, and at the end of the conversation you have a consensus and that's your decision. Next one. So, and that's where we just got to the next one, where we came up with that as an option. So there's other tools that are often used, like in workshops, the dot method and other things. Those are good ways to make decisions, but it's not the same as what you're doing when you're conducting a meeting. And you don't really have time during a meeting to, do a dot system or have a, kumbaya, gather around in a circle and come up with a consensus on something. So, next one. So the basics of Robert's Rules of Order. So it's going to be divided in just a few areas. The first one is, so the basics, and this is sort of where we got to when we said, why do we use Robert's Rules of Order? So up there it says, as you can see, only one subject at a time. People get very confused if you're trying to make decisions on like 4 things at the same time. So Robert's Rules of Order keeps that sort of strict. So it's one topic at a time. When you're done with that one, move to the next one. You should never have negative motions. So that would be, I move that we do not do this. Well, if you don't move it, you're not going to do it anyway. You would only have a motion to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to do it, right? So the point of having a negative motion is it just isn't how you do it. So if somebody actually makes a negative motion, just say, well, in the absence of a positive motion, we're going to move on and assume we're not going to do whatever you just suggested. The standard rule, and I encourage chairs to always enforce that, is one speaker at a time. You know, if you start talking, cross-talking, interrupting the speaker, midpoint, that's when the conversation degrades, and people get confused and frustrated. You don't want your participants, your members, to be confused and frustrated. You want everyone to be able to follow along as you go through the process. The other one is treating people fairly and equally. You know, that's just a standard rule. And you've got to do that, otherwise your credibility as the chair is degraded and the credibility of the organization is damaged if you're not fair and treating people equally. And you know, the basic concept there is it does require a majority in order to pass. So the majority does rule, but the minority has the opportunity to voice their opinion and speak. And you know, at the end of the day, they've got to accept the outcome, but at least, you know, if they're in the process, they get to voice their concerns and they're not just railroaded through. So that's part of the process there. Okay, next. So the most basic thing is the main motion. So somebody tell me, what is the main motion? What is a main motion?
That's different from, is there,
The topic that we're going to be discussing.
Exactly. That is basically where you state very clearly, this is what you think the club should do. And you put it in the form of a motion. Who can put, you know, what are the first three words when you're making a motion?
I move.
I move to, or I move that. It's not I motion to. I do hear that, and I cringe. So it's not I motion to, it's I move to.
You can't say
so-
I make a motion?
You can also say I make a motion, but it's you know, you're actually, that's what you're doing, is you're moving. So
Okay.
just say I move to. Next. So the main motion is your main idea, and that's the main concept. That's the foundation that you start with. So then we get into what are called subsidiary motions. Subsidiary motions are used to somehow it's an add-on to the main motion. It may change there's, you know, various things that subsidiary motions can do, and so we'll go through those specifically. The first batch of subsidiary motions are amendments. And of course, I'm sure everybody gets the concept of an amendment, but there are a couple of things that amendments can do. What are those?
Change?
They can change something. You can change like a word or a phrase in a motion. So change, add on,
Delete.
or delete. Very good. So substitutions or changing, add-ons or deleting sections of the main motion. The next one. So the next one is, okay, we've got a motion, you know, it's come up, it's a topic that, you know, as people are discussing, you're realizing that there's not really a consensus or a direction that the group wants to go in, and we don't have enough information to make a decision. So that's when this one jumps in, and that is a motion to refer. And it's very simple. I move to refer this matter to, and sometimes it's, well, always it will be to a committee. Usually it's the executive board. Sometimes it's a specific committee. If you have a political action committee, it would be logical to refer it to the political action committee or the fundraising committee or something like that. And so you're taking it out from the body and you're handing it off to a committee or a subset of the group. And so that they can actually dive into it and come back with suggestions or a cleaner, finalized motion that you can move forward with. The other is postponement. And so, it's pretty self-explanatory what a postponement is. It is a motion to put off making a decision. So I move to postpone this until the next meeting. Simple as that. And so that's easy. Not to be confused with a lot of people want to say, I move to lay this on the table. That is a different thing. So if somebody makes a motion to lay it on the table, when I'm the chair, I say, what's your intent of laying it on the table? And if they say to postpone it, I say, then your motion should be to postpone it. The motion to lay something on the table, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because it's really not something you should use too often. The motion to lay something on the table is like, here's the motion you've made, and it literally means we're putting it on this table. And if that passes, it sits on that table until somebody someday, somewhere far in the future says, I move to remove this from the table. And then it's back up for discussion and so forth. So, yeah, exactly. What's the purpose of that?
And is that something that needs to be recorded in minutes?
Yep, it would be recorded that it was laid on the table, and then someday in the future it would be recorded that there was a motion to remove it from the
Wow,
table.
that is insane.
It's sort of not, it's one of those motions that people make thinking, they're really thinking about postponing. And so as a chair, you should say, is your intent to postpone this? And if that's their intent, then the wording should be, there is a motion before you to postpone this until the next meeting or a specific date. So that's what the postponement's about. Next one. The motion to close debate. So everybody's been in a meeting where you're talking something to death, right? And what's the phrase that some people sort of yell out inappropriately during meetings when they've
Call
done
for the
that?
vote.
Call for the question, or just they say question. Now, first thing is that's inappropriate to just yell it out. You can only make a motion to close debate or call for the question if you've been recognized by the chair. So if the chair says, is there further discussion? You've got your hand up, they call on you, you can say, I move to close debate, or I move to call for the question. Just yelling it out, the chair should not be rewarding people for yelling out. So you don't say, oh, there's a motion to close debate, and jump on that. You actually need to reprimand the group for yelling out and then say, does someone want to make a motion to close debate? And then if they raise their hand, you recognize them, they make the motion to close debate. If you allow just yelling out inappropriately, that you just reinforce bad behavior. It's like training your puppy. You don't do that. So the motion is to close debate. So one thing about a motion to close debate, or it's also called previous question, is remember earlier we said protect the rights of the minority. So when you're closing debate, you're actually saying, okay, no more discussion. So you are actually then restricting the rights of the body, right? Because you're saying you can't talk anymore. You no longer, if this passes, no longer have the right to discuss. And so because of that, a motion to close debate requires a supermajority, a 2/3 majority, in order to pass. So anytime the rights of the group are infringed upon, it requires a supermajority. So the motion to close debate, not used often enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're
So we encourage that. One of my tricks when I'm president or chairing something, I have a plant in the audience, not literally a plant, but a person in the audience who I have coached, and when I call their name, and it's especially when they're not raising their hand, and I call their name, oh, I recognize Susan. Susan knows that that's my cue to make the motion to close debate, right? Because like I'm up here in front and realizing this is dying and everyone else is dying, but nobody's taking the initiative to close debate. So feel free to do that. Feel free to coach somebody in the audience to be ready to close debate when you call on them. Next one. So those are called, those we just finished were the subsidiary motions. So they're sort of side motions to your main motion.
I have one question though.
Quick question.
On your handout, you had postponement and then previous question. Did I miss?
Previous question and closed debate are the same thing. Good question. So the next set these are called incidental motions. And so they don't apply to your main motion or the amendments, referrals, et cetera, all those things. Incidental motions are really to help the meeting progress and move forward and to make sure there aren't mistakes being made and that sort of thing. So these are called incidental motions. They're generally not voted on by the body. They're just somebody in the body wants to point something out or bring up something. And usually it's a discussion between that individual and the chair for the benefit of the body. So that's what they're for. So the first one, which I'm sure you've all heard, is point of order. It's the one that gets everyone excited. They get, oh my God, I get to say point of order, and hopefully they do it correctly. But what's the purpose of a point of order?
Clarification.
Nope, it's not to clarify.
To keep it consistent.
It is to correct an error. That's it. Clarification would be a point of information or a point of parliamentary inquiry, which we'll get into next. But a point of order is to correct an error. So if something was done that you believe was incorrectly done, then you would say point of order. So for example, if the chair moved forward, somebody made a motion and then the chair said it's been moved to do such and such, is there any discussion? You might say, point of order.
Oh, I just had a question. On these, do you have to be recognized by the chair?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
you still have to be recognized by
Okay.
the chair.
Sorry.
I'll get to an exception
Yeah.
to that. But so a point of order would then be, you'd say point of order, there was no second to that motion. Okay? And then the chair would generally say, your point is correct. Or if they disagree with you, which in that case it'd be a little hard to argue the point, but if they disagree with you, they would say the chair disagrees, and they basically move on and stick with what they were doing. So the chair has to basically what they call rule on your point of order, where they have to clearly state whether they agree or disagree. If they agree, then they need to back up, correct the error, and then move forward from that point. So that's the point of order. Point of parliamentary inquiry. So if you can't remember anything else about parliamentary procedures, you should remember this, because this is where you ask a question about how to do something using parliamentary procedure. So that's why this is the one thing you should never forget, is how to ask. If you don't know how to do it, hopefully the chair does, and you should say, point of parliamentary inquiry, I want to change this motion by doing this and this. How do I do that? So the chair would then respond by saying that would be an amendment. You would say, I move to amend the motion to do such and such. So that's where the chair takes on the task of telling you what you want to do and how the process by which you should follow. So this is why this is the one to never forget. And remember to, if you can't remember anything else, remember to learn to ask how to do whatever it is you want to do. Now, that is also based on the premise that the chair will know how to answer it. So
Yeah.
I've been to lots of meetings,
Yeah.
so I don't know. So, but it's worth a try. Hopefully somebody in the room can respond to the question correctly. Next one is the point of information. So this is where you would ask a question to clarify something, or if you have data that's pertinent to the discussion, as long as it's not rhetorical, then this is an appropriate point at which to insert it. So for example, if you're having a discussion, and in the discussion somebody says, well, I don't think we have enough money to do this. And you happen to be the treasurer. So as soon as that person's done discussing, you would say, point of information. As the treasurer, I would like to point out that we budgeted for this item and we have X number of dollars in our budget for it. That would be the appropriate use. It would not be appropriate to say, point of information, I'm sure we have enough money in our budget and we need to pass this. That's called discussion. So that's not the use of point of information in terms of providing information or details.
And you did say that you can use that to ask a question
Yes.
for clarification.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
if you're like
So it's
confused,
ask or
okay,
answer.
how will this affect such and such?
Okay.
You know, then you can ask that as a question. Sometimes people do those, they are actually rhetorical questions. So they're trying to use it to further their feelings on how the outcome of this motion should be. But so as a chair, I've had people do that. And you know, when we do, a lot of times when I'm doing meetings, it's like 3 people speak in favor, that sort of thing. When they're done with their little rhetorical question that they tried to slip in as a point of information, I count that as either discussion for or against. And I make a point of noting that after they've done it. So don't try that trick on me. Okay, next one. Division. Now this is the one where you don't have to be recognized. You can just say division, and you can inappropriately yell out because it's one word and it has to be done in a timely manner, and the chair knows exactly what to do the second you've said division. So what is division?
Math.
It's also division of the House.
Means you have to take a vote.
Exactly. So if you just
What?
did a motion, I'll go with. If you just did, you had a motion, it was voted on, it was a voice vote, and you're up here at the chair, and it was like, oh yeah, that passed. Let's move on. And somebody out there is thinking, oh, that's not exactly how I heard it. So division forces the chair to then do a counted vote. So it stops the process. So if it's a voice vote, it's not just one person interpreting the outcome, which is really what happens because the chair says it passed or failed based on a voice vote, what they're hearing. If you disagree with that, you can say division of the House. Now, a good chair, or the appropriate thing for the chair to do, is if it's even questionable, is to say we need to move to a voice vote or a counted vote so that we can clarify this because it was too close to call verbally, through a voice vote.
Wouldn't you recommend that for anytime it's a 2/3 majority, that should that always be a
No,
count?
because sometimes, like previous question, to close debate,
Yeah.
it's usually unanimous.
Okay.
So if you can, and it's so much faster.
Yeah.
You've been to our central
Yeah,
committee
yeah.
meetings where we have to shut down for 2 or 3 minutes to count sticks. And then people compare notes and they realize they are one off and they do it again. So now you're into 5 minutes for one quick
Got it.
motion. So if it's really obvious, even with a supermajority, do it with a voice vote. And then but obviously on that one, you're going to have to, if there's any reasonable opposition in a 2/3, then you should go to a counted vote.
And then with division,
Yeah.
if one person says it, does it that's it?
Only one person required to
Request it.
force
Yeah, to force
a
it.
counted vote.
Okay.
You will hear, if it's really obvious and somebody calls a division, you're going to hear moans and groans from the audience because they don't want to stop, because they all heard, the outcome, and you're just being obnoxious at that point sometimes.
How does that work on, we've all seen things on TV with Congress doing things like this with the ayes. So the ayes have it, and clearly they did not. Can anyone can the chair gavel it down anyway and say, I don't care? I didn't hear
they
that,
they have their own set of rules that aren't Robert's Rules of Order, and they live in a different world than we do, as we all know. And basically the leadership controls everything, and so I suppose there's some freshman member of Congress out there saying, well, division, and they're like ignoring that person and dropping them to the worst committee there is possible, and moving them. Their office is now in the basement, so with no staff. Yeah.
I've been in places where people demanded a paper ballot. Would that be division too? In other words, there was a voice vote. They didn't like it, so they wanted a paper ballot.
That would be that would be really technically like a roll call vote,
Mm-hmm.
and in most organizations that would actually, it depends on your rules. In some clubs, I know in the Democrats for Equality, for example, for elections, anyone can request a paper ballot for endorsement votes or club elections, I believe. I'm correct. Yeah, that's right. But generally, that's not a rule, a written rule. So if somebody was to ask for that sort of thing, it would be called a roll call vote, or a counted ballot vote, and it would generally have to be in the form of a motion that then is ruled on by the body. And if a majority say, yes, I want to actually write on a piece of paper instead of just doing that. Now, one of the problems, and I'll point this out, is in the Democratic Party, now this doesn't apply to clubs, so Central Committee, State Party, on up, we can never we are all there as representatives of other people. Therefore, all of our votes are always public. So if it is a written ballot where you actually write your vote, it's actually, you have to sign it, put your name on it and sign it, and it has to be available for people to look at. So for example, like the DNC elections at the last state party exec board meeting, everybody had to sign their ballot. I actually went, I was up in Sacramento, I went and looked at all 270 ballots. I know who didn't vote for me. Nobody in this room. You did. Craig did. Very good, thank you very much. You did. Yeah, so within the party, we have the rule that you are there representing people, therefore your vote is always public, just like the members of Congress's vote should be. So that's the division, so I don't want to get too bogged down in that. Ruth?
Well, while you're still on motions, I had a pet peeve. Somebody that said, so moved.
Yeah.
That's not a motion.
Well, it can be a pet peeve. So if well, let me circle back to that. That's under my sort of rules for how to chair a meeting, or ideas. So the very last one here, I think it's the last one, among the incidental motions is the appeal. So remember back when we did point of order, and somebody could point out a mistake that the chair made, and the chair has the option of saying, yep, you're right, or nope, you're wrong, and then move on. At that point, when they say you're wrong, if you still think you're right, and you think a majority of people in the room think you're right, you can make the motion to appeal the decision of the chair. And then you get to point out how you perceived that should be. The chair should point out how they perceived it should be, and then it goes to a vote of the body, and the will of the body prevails. Even if it's like a complete violation of the bylaws, unfortunately, under an appeal, the will of the body prevails. So that's up there. I think I was county chair for 9 years, and I think I had maybe 2 people appeal one of my rulings in that 9 years. So it doesn't happen very often. But there are times when clear mistakes are made and they should be corrected, and sometimes the chair makes that error. And it's always wonderful to stand up and say, with your Robert's Rules of Order in hand, and say, according to page 223, paragraph 4 in Robert's Rules of Order, this is what you were supposed to have done and you didn't do that. You almost always win an appeal when you do that. So I've learned. Okay, next. It's almost like, So here, let's get into the role of the chair. The role of the chair is the most important thing about the meeting. The success or failure of a meeting is based on how well the chair does. So I like to, I actually did this on my Mac, so it got reformatted. I see, which happens. So the first thing is, when you're chairing the meeting, if you're a club president, always be ready for that meeting. Have your agenda, know what's going to come up. Just be completely prepared and well-versed. Your officers should be prepared and well-versed. You should have gone over all the major things in your executive committee meeting. You should avoid, as much as possible, surprises and things like that. So being well-prepared helps you get through the meeting and everything goes smoothly. Be prompt. It's nothing worse than the president of a club showing up like 2 minutes before the meeting's supposed to start, and then 15 minutes after the meeting's supposed to start, you're finally ready to start the meeting. I was always like at least a half hour before my meetings. I was in the room and getting things set up. And because what happens is as soon as people start showing up, they have questions for you, right? You're the president. Everybody's got a question for you. What are we doing about this? What do we do about that? When is this? When is that? So if you're trying to set up and get ready for the meeting in those 10 or 15 minutes when everyone's coming in the room and bombarding you with questions, you get behind. So be there, be early, get all your stuff done before people start walking in the door. Obviously that goes with the be punctual. Be strict. There is a reason why we have gavels when we're chairing meetings. Don't be afraid to use them. And I know, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to do that. But when you pound that gavel, it gets people's attention. And I don't want to compare our members of our clubs to like when I was teaching high school freshmen. That would be an insult to my freshmen. No, just kidding. No, the point I'm going to make is that once you start, when you're a new president especially, or chairing an organization, start off being more strict than you ever thought you would be in your life. You can always become less strict as time goes by and they get used to you and you get used to them. But it's hard to, ratchet it down if it's already out of control. So it's better to start being very strict and very rigid and then back off when it feels comfortable. And that was actually something they taught us when we were teachers. They were saying the first day, be a complete tyrant. And then as your students get used to you, you can sort of negotiate that middle ground where everybody's having a good time and learning and all that sort of thing. And that's the way clubs should be as well. I don't mean to extremes, but if, the very first time when you're chairing a meeting, somebody interrupts another speaker, use that gavel. Hit that gavel, hit it hard and loud so that everybody in the room hears it, and then say, do not interrupt the other speakers. That's one person at a time. You will have your opportunity. Right now, this person has the floor, and nobody else should be talking. Correct them, and then move on.
Where do you get gavels?
At the gavel store. Nowadays, it's online.
It's online, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon's got them at a good price.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm sure
cool.
they do.
Good to know.
Amazon is always, whatever it is in the world, I'm sure you could buy a nuclear bomb on Amazon. The other thing is
I just want to insert something is that when you first start that regime, you're going to get pushback.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And be prepared for
And
it.
people will test you, at your
Yes,
first meeting.
yes.
And they will.
And the worst thing that happens is, I've been to central committee meetings all over the state. Nothing drives me more crazy than the chair is up there and like, I'm not exactly sure what to do at this point. Well, guess what? There's always at least 10 people in the room who know exactly what you should be doing and how you should be doing it, and they're going to tell you. And from that point on, you are like not in control. And so don't ever act like, I tell people fake it, act like you know exactly what you're doing, it's partly theatrics. But act confident. I think that's maybe on another page, or maybe it's down at the very bottom. Anyway, so be strict, be impartial. So if you're club president and your club's getting ready to make endorsements or hasn't made endorsements yet, and there's 2 or 3 candidates and you're the club president, don't be like running around, being too favorable. Or if if that's the case, then you have to relinquish the chair during the endorsement process because you've already demonstrated that you're impartial. So stay out of the debates as the chair. Stay out of the discussion. If a motion is made, you're chairing the meeting. You're not a participant in the back and forth discussion. It is appropriate to share pertinent information. For example, like I brought up earlier, if somebody said, I don't think we have enough money in the budget, and you know that you do, and you budgeted for it, you could insert that information into the conversation. But don't be showing where your partialities are, because then everyone in the room will question every decision you make about endorsements or whatever it is that's moving forward through your club. Craig.
So I just want to share something that would continually happen to me when I was president of the Center for Transfer Quality back in the last century. And particularly before what would appear to be a contentious endorsement meeting or any kind of decision that looked like it might be contentious, I cannot tell you how many times people, you know, when a social situation, whatever, would say to me about a forthcoming meeting, well, what's the club going to do about X?
Yeah, right. Like,
And my standard answer was, I have no idea.
right.
And because I just felt like, even if I had a sense of what I thought the club might do, it's not my place to say. You know, or sometimes I'd say, well, you should just go to the meeting and find out.
Yep.
We'll know then.
Yeah. Good point. So be impartial, be honest. If there's something that somebody asks a question and you don't know the answer, don't try to BS them. Just say, hey, I don't know. We'll get back to you with that information when we, we'll look into it. Be rational. Don't be, just too crazy about things. I like to interject a little humor now and then, just to lighten the mood, especially if I'm being super strict. So it doesn't hurt, and I'm not sure what the next one says.
Here.
Current. Oh, so be up. You're the leader of the club. You should be sort of up on what's happening, and if your club is the environmental Dems, you are you're up on environmental issues. That's just the way it is. If you should know who's running for office. You should just be keeping current. Read the newspaper, or online. Don't actually buy it. Nobody does that anymore. But just keep up with things so that you're familiar with what thing, because things are going to come up. You're going to get asked questions, and you should know.
Knowledgeable.
Same thing. There it is. Use that gavel. And can't emphasize that enough. Use it until you don't need to use it. That's the point. Next one. Anticipate things. When you're going into a meeting that if it's an endorsement meeting, and we all lived through the city attorney's race this spring when the endorsements were going on. Those were contentious. We had 3 strong candidates, all had different degrees of backing and so forth, and so that gets emotional. There's strong connections between people and their candidates. So one of the things I always did when I was the chair or when I was the club president, before we moved into a decision that I knew was going to be divisive, I would always remind the group that we need to be civil, we need to treat one another with respect, and at the end of the day, we need to make a decision that we can all be proud of, because it was done fairly and it followed the process and the procedure, and we did it in a manner that we can feel proud of. And so by sort of setting that tone, it brings down the level of people come into these endorsement meetings like, okay, this camp's over here, this camp's over here, and it's like a war. Mm-hmm. And you need as a leader to bring that down and remind people that our purpose is to elect good Democrats. Mm-hmm. And we need to be united as a party in order to do that. So that should be part of the discussion, and you as the leader need to project that. Embrace teachable moments. And so if somebody makes a mistake, like they make the motion to lay something on the table, and that they really mean postpone that, then say, this is a good opportunity for all of us to understand the difference between a motion to lay on the table and a motion to postpone. And then just really quickly talk them through so that everybody in the room sort of goes, oh, now I get it. And so embrace teachable moments rather than making fun of somebody just kidding. Okay, so this is where Ruth's thing comes in. And so when you're chairing meetings, there's a certain, you have an agenda. There are certain things that the club's going to do. And so, for example, if you're going to have an event and you need to allocate X number of dollars for that, you sort of present that as the chair, and then you might follow by saying the chair entertains the motion to do X, Y, and Z. And then somebody in the audience, whether Ruth likes it or not, is going to say, so moved. And then somebody's going to say second before you can even snap your fingers. That's sort of what you're asking for. You're asking for that motion to be made quickly so they can get on the table, because it's generally one of those things that's not really debated or discussed. So that's the, and remember, part of getting through these meetings is keeping it moving, because if people are bored and it's bogged down, then they're, that's when they start causing problems. So keep things moving, and the entertaining motions by the chair is one of the ways to do that. Another one is if there are no objections. So sometimes you get a motion that is bogging down because somebody's pointed out a fatal flaw in the motion, but they still like the concept and they want it to move forward. But so that's when the chair can sort of say, okay, if there are no objections, how about if we modify this motion to read as is, and then you lay it out there. You could ask for somebody to make a motion to amend it and go through all that process, or you could sort of skip over all that, especially when you know there's consensus and you're asking the question, if there are no objections. If there's one objection, then you need to ask for a motion to amend it. If there are no objections, then the consensus of the body is to make that change and do it quickly and efficiently. So feel free to use that, especially in your meetings that you've got a full agenda. Feel free to use that, and but make sure that people understand that if they do object, that there is actually a process, and you need to jump back to the process. I just put this in here. It's not. I think somebody probably else is going to talk about minutes. I usually do this for county committees and so forth around the state. One of the things that I do want to point out whenever I'm talking to a group is meeting minutes are actually a legal document. They are a record of your minutes, or of your meeting, what has happened there. So there's two things about that. Is one, you want to have an accurate record of what decisions were made. What you don't want to happen is these overzealous secretaries who write, and then so-and-so said this, this, and this. The worst thing is, and so-and-so said that if we pass this and enact this, we are opening ourselves up to lawsuit because we are knowingly doing it. You've just written in your minutes grounds for that lawsuit, and you've documented for them that you knew you were making this decision that they could later come back and use against you. So no, the only things you put in the minutes are when the meeting started, if it's a board meeting, who's present. If it's not, how many members were present, the time, location, and then decisions that are made and actions that are taken. Like if reports were made, say the following reports were made. But don't get into the specifics, especially on discussion, the back and forth discussion. That you just don't want to do that.
I wanted to add to that because I'm the secretary for DEMCO.
Uh-huh.
We put our minutes on our website, and that makes it so you can Google it.
Yes.
I was Googling a candidate's name, and I looked,
Right.
and there it was. DEMCO Executive Board Minutes.
Yeah. So again, all the more reason to be very careful about what's in your minutes. Only the decisions you make and an overview of what took place during the meeting. Don't get into he said this or she said that, because that then that's a recording of the minutes or of the meeting, not minutes of the meeting. So you don't want to get too specific. And I have 1 minute left. So Jen?
Is there a specific time you have to put the vote number, the actual count of the vote?
Anytime it's a counted vote, if it's a voice vote, you say the motion was approved on a voice vote, or the motion was defeated on a voice vote. If it was a counted vote, you record that. You write down the motion was approved 21-3. Anytime it's counted, you have to record that. So, yes.
What is the rule or tradition for a chair actually voting on?
Well, that's to make or break a tie.
That's it?
Make or break a tie. That's it.
Okay. And
And
what about notes in a meeting as opposed to minutes?
If somebody is taking notes, don't adopt them. Remember, you approve the minutes. So if you approve them, then you are saying these are legally accurate records of the meeting. So if they're minutes, you're not. So my time is up, and I'm done. Thanks. And I think next up is Steve Rivera.